Hey, good morning again, everybody. I'm going to get us started. Thanks for coming. I'm excited for what you all are going to hear and learn about today. I need to do my initial pitch. I know you guys have probably seen some promo and there's a whole lot more coming on, but Wednesday, May 18th is our annual Smoke-Free SC Summit. It will be here in Columbia, full day, 9 to 3 in person. And the theme is overcoming health disparities in tobacco prevention and control. And you can go to www.smokefreescsummit.org to get all the details, the agenda. We're still finalizing 1 or 2 speakers. And then there's a whole lot more information that'll be coming out next week. And I hope you guys will attend. It's going to be incredibly informative. And I'm really pleased with all the folks who've decided to or agreed to join us that day. And so like we've done on our previous several months, we're going to start with a legislative update from Beth Johnson from the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. And that'll be followed by Shayla Compton, our host today. And I will introduce her a little more formally after Beth gives us the scoop. What's going on? I know we're getting near the I forget what that middle date, the crossover date. That's coming up soon too. And there's a lot of changes for you to tell us about. So Beth, you go for it. You're on.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm trying to get this line. You guys see this line that's right down my face. I'm trying to get this line adjusted in my screen this morning. So apologies for the shifting around. But good morning. Happy Friday. Lots of changes at the State House coming our way. So it will be an interesting end of the session and a interesting beginning to the new session for the reorganizational period in December. So right now the House has been on furlough for 2 weeks. They were able to pass a budget, the House version of the budget, in 1 day, which was amazing and never happened before. So it took them 1 day to pass the first version of our state budget. And then they took off for 2 weeks. So now the Senate has been kind of working on some special projects, and they have set several bills for special order. I say special order, and I want to just kind of highlight that for a minute because it's important that we know those terms as we think about preemption and the really bad tobacco preemption bill that we've all been trying to stop and to fight. So as long as other bills, other issues are being set to special order, that means that there is uninterrupted debate on those bills, which again just kind of pushes down that preemption bill that we're trying to fight, pushes it back off the schedule, off the calendar, and hopefully we can survive until May, supposedly 2nd or so, when signing day is supposed to happen, the end of session. So excited and hopeful that we can continue to push back that preemption bill. I will note that in the Senate, we started off the year with 5 senators objecting to the bad preemption bill, which covers flavors and tobacco retail licensing, and we're down to now 3 senators. So we've seen 2 senators remove their name from the bill as objecting to the bill. It's a play, it's a ploy, they trade votes. They're not supposed to, but they trade votes for things here and there. And so that's what we're hearing right now. But it always brings me concern and alarm when we see folks removing their name from that preemption bill. And really, that's what happened in the House with preemption and why it passed so quickly, where they were the members were trading votes and they were making deals on preemption versus a hate crimes bill in our state. So that hate crimes bill is in the Senate. It's the same place where preemption is. If the Senate wanted to, they could do the same thing they did in the House. They could switch the votes, they could play around, they could make some backdoor deals, and they could say, let's debate one or the other. So we're still on high alert, cautious, hopeful, but high alert with the preemption bill. The other bills that we've been following this year have been a statewide tobacco retail license bill, a T21, statewide T21 bill, and then most recently there was introduced a bad flavors bill that would cover only synthetic products and not all flavors. So only synthetic products and all flavors except menthol. So this is not a strong bill. It's not something that most of our national partners could support. I don't see any of those bills, or 3. I don't see any of those bills moving forward for crossover date, which was what Rebecca was referring to, and that date is April the 7th. So we're hopeful that those bills will just kind of hang tight. I know that tobacco retail licensing is not going anywhere. I don't think T21 is going anywhere. I'm almost certain it's not. And I don't see flavors getting a hearing either, which is good. So that means that all of those bills will die at the end of the session in May and will have to be reintroduced in January. So lots of things shaking up as well in the House, as we've lost the Speaker of the House has said that he would not run again. The Speaker of the House is stepping down. The House Majority Leader, Gary Semrell, who was the co-sponsor of the bad preemption bill, is also said he would not run again. And there's about 11 or 12 other House members who are not seeking re-election. So that's going to be interesting as we look into next year and the 140-ish House members that we have, who's going to be returning, who's not, and what leadership positions are going to be kind of jockeyed around. Rumor has it right now that Chairman Merle Smith, Chairman of House Ways and Means, will be the new Speaker of the House. And he is from Sumter. He is very friendly, usually, to healthcare issues, having a dad and two brothers who are both, all three physicians. So he kind of understands the healthcare atmosphere a little bit more and has been friendly and favorable. So we'll see how that all kind of plays out. The Senate will come back, they'll do their budget, and it'll be a crazy rush to the finish line for May. Any questions? I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, Beth. It's always great to get that update. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear it every 4 weeks too. It's great to have you a part of this. So thank you for doing it.
Sure. Glad to help.
All right. And obviously you guys can throw questions in the chat box anytime you want, or use your reactions and raise your hand and that kind of thing. So now I'm going to turn it over to our host, Shayla Compton, who is, and I'm going to read this correctly, she's at the Center for Black Health and Equity, and she is the program manager for the Center's Tobacco Nation Capacity Building Initiative. And a whole lot of the intention behind these monthly webinars and monthly roundtables is also around this idea of building capacity. The more we are talking to each other and hearing from each other and bringing in more people to talk about what's going on and how to build support, the stronger we can be building capacity within South Carolina. And so I am going to just turn it over to Shayla, and she's going to do a 10 to 15 minute presentation and then open it up to questions. And again, please feel free to use your reactions and throw questions in the chat box as you need to. So Shayla, all you.
All right, thank you, Rebecca, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Shayla Compton. I am coming to you by way of Summerville, South Carolina. I am a newly adjusting South Carolina resident by way of Anchorage, Alaska, which is my hometown. So yeah, I know. If you have Benadryl or Zyrtec that you are currently not in need of, I will put my address in the chat because the spring season is hitting something. Philip, I feel we are there. We are there. I can't see it, but I can feel it in spirit. It's something, something for the sinus cavities. But no less, I have loved the transition here. Coming from the state TPC program as a health equity coordinator for several years and coming into this role and being able to expand and do a little bit more regional work and still being able to focus on a topic I am extremely passionate about, which is health equity, health disparities, and how do we address this within the context of tobacco. So all these folks here are advocates. We know about the 4 buckets when it comes about tobacco control in populations and the work we're leading. So preventing youth initiation, eliminating exposure to secondhand smoke, and supporting cessation for those who currently use tobacco. With that 4th bucket, eliminating tobacco use disparities. This is where in the more recent years, I say last 5 years, the Office of Smoking and Health, the CDC, has really kind of given a push or a nudge to states and some programs about how do we do this in an approach that's community-led, that's community-driven. So what I want to introduce, sharing my screen here, is the community development model. Excuse me just a second. All right, so we're able to view that on everyone else's end? Perfect. So we'll talk about the community development model. By a show of hands, has anyone heard of this theoretical framework for approaching the work in tobacco policy change? So Rebecca raised her hand. Okay, thumbs up. Okay. So I'm going to give like a 50,000 foot view about this theoretical framework that the center uses in our approach to work in the community. And I should reference this. This is really from the lens of how to do this work to strengthen local advocacy efforts among African-American communities. So the overview, the community development model. So we talked about the fourth bucket, eliminating tobacco use disparities. The model, what it really frames is, in order to see the changes that we've seen for the general population in decreasing tobacco use, we have to make sure that the populations who are most burdened by tobacco use, both directly and indirectly, have a direct role in finding the solution within the community. So simply nothing for us without us. And the community development model, it takes it a step further for a lot of us who work in tobacco control. We have those initial assessment pieces where we look at maybe the prevalence or the absence of disease in communities to identify the approaches we're going to take, where we're going to focus our efforts. And I'm going to go into the two components of the community development model, which is building community competency, followed by the development. And how do we operationalize the approach of community development within the center with supporting African-American communities? And then also talk about an open discussion, what determines success for local advocacy efforts for African-American communities, or any community actually that historically has not been included in the process of doing the work for tobacco policy change. So the first component I want to talk about is the community competency. So all of our work in public health, I hope everyone can say this, is data-driven. So we look, where is the adult tobacco use rates, the youth tobacco use rates, the type of tobacco use. So with this theoretical framework, you take it a step further. And we use 4 pillars to really dig into the part of building cultural competency, which is, in order to get to the point of building competency, you have to understand the history, culture, context, and geography as it relates to tobacco and the use of tobacco within a defined community. So when we talk about history, what are the important phenomena that has happened that has shaped the collective consciousness of a group of people? So for African Americans in North America, that would be the enslavement of folks that were brought to North America. For Jewish communities, it would likely be the Holocaust. For Native American groups, it may be the near genocide, and even to the more recent atrocities of boarding schools and families that were separated. So understanding the deep-rooted history and the intersection of how these historical impacts can have an impact on everyone's lives at this point in time. Culture. So this, very broadly, what are the values, the norms, the faiths, and beliefs that inform the behaviors and collective lifestyles of people? And this can be anywhere from, here in the Southeast portion, we enjoy pretty moderately great weather throughout the year. So lifestyle, our norms, it may be maybe willing to approach things a bit more gracefully, I would say, than maybe some of us folks in the North, because we're in between the seasons of all the hectic changes that can come with that. So that's just a very simple example of culture. It is also, it is a part of our lifestyle. It is a part of the behaviors and norms. And this could be culture from the aspect of race, or racial identity, even to where you live within the country. Context. So our lived experience, both social and psychological, what shapes daily life, what is impacting our well-being. And the context would be, for example, while the enslavement of African people in this country has not been in place for many years, there are still some current realities that are being confronted, such as systemic and structural racism, the stresses that result from that, other issues of sexism, homophobia, transphobia, as well as subpar conditions of employment, housing, or education as it relates to many communities across the country. And then geography. So this helps provide an ecological mechanism to view within a population, there are also differences. There is no monolithic approach to understanding what is the best approach, the evidence-based approach, or the promising practice for doing work with African-American communities. It all depends on a point of place and the circumstances in which people are living. So that helps to frame the cultural competency, the community competency of the groups that we're working with. Once you have an understanding of that and knowing that you're going to continue to go back to asking the questions within those 4 pillars, how are we understanding the communities? Because communities, they can transcend over time. But the next part, the other bucket, is the community development piece. And this is where I think a lot of the folks on this call really come in with our levels of expertise, our training, and our lived experience that we can provide to helping communities to build capacity and build infrastructure. So the component that we take with this work with the center, we have what we call the 5-part community capacity building process. So the first part, like most of the work that you all lead, it starts with assessment. We not only do the 4 pillars I just discussed, we also look at the things like the most recent community health needs assessment. We want to get an understanding of any other initiatives that have taken place to address tobacco. For the work that we're doing with the Tobacco Nation capacity building process, we're focusing either on the elimination of all flavors and all products, including menthol, or for smoke-free air ordinances. And right now, we're currently working with 6 cities and 5 different states, and expanding as we speak right now with the outreach and request for technical assistance. So assessment, we go into deeper layers of that, and that also includes some community outreach assessment, asset mapping for the coalitions to really understand the network that they have to help to do this work. The next part is the learning. So we start with the foundation of understanding the historical intersection between African Americans, racism, and tobacco. We build off of that with understanding the power with coalition development, bringing people together with the diverse skill sets to work strategically together towards a goal. And we also provide training and resources on action planning, which is highlighted in the 3rd part. And this is kind of going from the 9 essential questions of public health when it comes to identifying a problem and how you're going to communicate the problem with the community, as well as a SWOT analysis. So understanding the current threats. Beth just laid out 3 right there in her announcement to be actively aware of that could affect the work at the local level. And with that action planning, we also help them prepare for the do, which is lesson 4. We prepare them to understand the elements that are necessary for a successful education campaign and connecting those efforts with other resources that are already established, so such as DHEC, which has a lot of data and resources at their disposal that the coalitions have been able to use, working with counter tools to better demonstrate the need to address the predatory marketing that's in the neighborhoods, especially in African-American communities, where we know the number of retailers is higher. Menthol tobacco products are overwhelmingly abundant and they're very cheap to boot. So we prepare them with the guidance on how to approach their decision makers, saying, here's the problem. We have collected the necessary data that demonstrates the problem. We have community support, and here's the solution that we like to be heard and considered for implementation. And we also understand some of these folks that have opted into this process, this is not their 9 to 5. Many have not worked in tobacco control before, but as they have gone through the training process, they can make the connections, especially with menthol, about, wow, yeah, every person in my family that does smoke smokes menthol products. Or yeah, I do notice, within Charleston, you can't miss a beat without a corner convenience store that's from head to toe draped in tobacco advertising. But if you go over across the bridge to Mount Pleasant, you don't see that. So helping them understand and, use the messaging about what it means for disparities or inequities, and also talking to them about how do you get input from the community so that you're not the standalone champion in doing this work. We also introduced them through the process of what it means to first know who your local lobbyists are for an issue that you're working with and how to work with them effectively. So understanding with this work, we cannot do direct or grassroots lobbying, but we can support their efforts to do the work of raising attention, educating the community, and doing advocacy to get in front of those decision makers who can give them what they want. And if with persistence and hard work, we don't expect this to be done in a year, even if it's done within 3 years, that would be short of a miracle in some cases. There is a part, the celebration. And the celebration, it is continuing the communication with the community, helping them understand why this happened, how to be in compliance with the policy change, and to support efforts, especially in this case with cessation. And we actually encourage coalitions we work with to start the process of raising awareness about cessation resources early on, not waiting until a policy change goes forward. Local advocacy efforts. So how does community development model support local advocacy efforts? So this is a recent picture submitted from the Breathe Easy Tri-County Coalition. Their efforts are targeted for the city of Charleston, and they're recently at the Kids Bash last weekend. And they actually had some of their youth come in and did this Spin Smart where they're educating the community about flavors and different issues with tobacco. And I wanted to share this picture because it was really important, is that young people are often not the first go-to when we're talking about an inclusive coalition and having voice to these issues and being part of the solution. And these youth were anywhere from the age of 6 to 12 and 13. And they were just engaging with the community. They did the spin the wheel, and LaShondra Morgan, who's the director of this project, she said, as I sat back and I watched the youth engage, when we talked about tobacco, almost every youth, whether they were 7 or 8 or a teenager, when we talked about tobacco, immediately leaned back and looked at their parents to say, oh yeah, I have a parent who smokes in the home and they need to hear this information. Or do you have information I can share with them so I can gently harass them on the ride home as we leave the event to really address it. And so after the training, the continued TA, what it looks like, we support the development of subcommittees that focus on community mobilization, cessation, data and surveillance, education and communication planning, and then working with our local lobbyists for the policy and legislative monitoring and analysis. And so we prepare the coalition to understand their roles with what the coalition can do to support the work getting over, the final line, and kind of having that understanding of the roles of the lobbyists in supporting this work. And Charleston is, there have been a number of coalitions, for in the Low Country area that have addressed smoke-free air ordinances, but this focus on menthol and flavors, it is relatively new for this group. And they have been taking on the learning process particularly well, and we're continuing to build their advocacy. And the greatest part, we talk about what a success look like, it is about empowering communities to understand the process and the available resources to them, and that they can see themselves as being part of the solution in the work. Too often, a lot of public health policy work, it's only from the grass tops and not the grassroots. And we're combining this effort because we see that there's a place for both. And so we're trying to break down the barriers so that local communities, especially African-American communities, can see themselves more in the process of doing this work. So there's a lot of great opportunities to be involved in this work, even as state partners. If you have questions or interest, I'd be more than willing to answer them, but this is my 50,000-foot view of this model that we use and how we're hoping this lends to the efforts at the local level in South Carolina.
Thanks so much, Shayla. What do you all want to talk about, ask, contribute? Mhm.
So I have a question and comment for you, Shayla, because I think you guys have done a really good job at bringing in different coalition partners, some traditional and some non-traditional. So for the other folks on the call today, can you talk a little bit about what efforts you all have done to ensure you have kind of the right people at the table, traditional and non-traditional partners? Because I do think you've done a good job at that, and we can benefit from your, what you guys have done and taking that to other smaller coalitions around the state.
Sure, absolutely. So the center, upon being awarded, we first looked through our Rolodex, our customer relations management system, and said, which partners do we have within the Tobacco Nation states? 13 states in the Midwest and the South, plus we added Georgia and North Carolina. They were not included in Tobacco Nation, which is surprising. But the approach we take, we identify organizations that are already in this role of serving within African-American communities. They don't necessarily, most are led by African-Americans, but we do encourage a multi-ethnic, multicultural coalition development. And we identify these organizations, we do some initial assessment. In this case, the group for Charleston is the National Council of Negro Women and the Bethune-Leonard section there in Charleston. And they have a long-standing reputation for community advocacy and community organizing. They had never worked in the part of tobacco specifically as an organization, but in many areas of health advocacy, voter registration. And so they approached this work. LaShondra, who is working within the field of public health, said, we really do need to address this because the issues of smoking in the community, it was the predatory advertising that just really, that was the unnerving part for them. So we take them through the 5-part community capacity training, and we encourage them, like I said, to identify both traditional and non-traditional partners. So this can include faith-based organizations, youth-serving organizations, folks who have those direct connections to your target decision makers. So people who work within the city of Charleston. And we bring these folks together. We help them understand our goal. They help us in identifying available resources. They also help us point out gaps that we may have in the approach. I feel like that's really important. So the approach we take from the center is, here's a process that we've kind of fine-tuned to make sure that the local efforts stay rooted in health equity. And so what that means with health equity, the lens, is that the people who are most burdened can participate and that we don't, even unintentionally, put additional barriers there. So one of the examples, our Education and Communication Subcommittee Chair, Dr. McDaniels, she sits with the board of South Carolina for the Arts and Humanities section. She is a wealth of knowledge. She has never been involved in this work directly with tobacco or even maybe to public health to the extent. And she's like, I'm really wanting to participate, but I'm kind of concerned about the level I can do this because I'm legally blind. And I was like, well, this is a lens of showing that people of different abilities, of different perspectives, and different access points within the community do have a say in this work. So we really work to make sure that that's reflected in every step of the work there. And we continually work with our coalitions to ask themselves the question as a recruit for their coalitions, how is health equity reflected in the group of people that we're working with to do this work?
Sheila, thanks for that. I appreciate the depth of the detail that you're able to provide on the work that you're doing, but I just really appreciate you sharing that this is all intentional, and that you guys are really out there doing the work, and that, you have a plan and you realize it may take time, but not because of the issue per se, but because this is how you do the work. And that you're building the capacity in the community, you're building those relationships, and all of that will sort of get you to the end goal at some point, but that, the plan is there. And so it's really great to see that sort of roll out, and appreciate the work that you guys are doing in the community.
Thank you, Anjul. And one thing I would mention here, in my role, I have seen smoke-free, tobacco price, every advocacy piece, policy change you can think of, take place over years or decades, in some cases, in different environments. And one thing we are seeing, and we think is really critical, it is the infrastructure piece. So for example, this training, in part with the pandemic, it has all been done virtually at this point. So we're working here in Charleston, we're working in Cleveland, we're working in Grand Rapids, we're working in Detroit, we're working in Pine Bluff. All of this has been done virtually, and part of them building the capacity and the infrastructure. Whereas key is two organizations, the ones that were working both in Detroit and Grand Rapids, had existing infrastructure as a coalition for other areas they had worked on collectively. So for example, Detroit had done some work before around voter registration. Because of that infrastructure in place, the training, being able to absorb it, implement it, and apply these aspects, a year after their training, they are already at the process where they have model language that's been drafted, they've identified local champions, they have their lobbyists on board, and now they are in the process of presenting this before the decision makers within a year. And this is both for the city of Detroit as well as Wayne County. So when you have that infrastructure, and that's what we're really focused on, the policy win, yes, that'd be a great win, that'd be a great cherry on top of the sundae, but setting up the infrastructure so they can fight not only for tobacco, because after this, who knows what the next efforts could be, whether it's focused on tobacco or it's focused on food insecurity and low food access areas, or if it's focusing on addressing diabetes or other needs they identify within the community. With that infrastructure set, it really sets them up to take on anything. And part of that success, what it can look like for coalitions, is being able to use this training and leverage other additional funding sources to support the work and sustain it in the community.
Well, Shayla, I want to say thank you for sharing this and welcome to South Carolina. So for those of us in the Upstate, when you coming to see us?
Soon. I've traveled through heading up to visit family in Michigan. I need to come back and actually spend some time. But if the invitation is there, I will definitely go. The
invitation's here. Beth is a regular visitor, and so we love to have her. I think Barbara's out on spring break this week. She's a regular visitor. So we have some good work going on. I'm trying to get Anjul to come to Greenville. You know, it's the happening place to be, you know, but we do have a lot going on. And I would love to connect with you one-on-one outside of this to let you know more about Just Say Something and the work we're doing in our community.
Absolutely. Let's connect.
Philip, we have a little bit of time because I was actually going to ask you, could you talk just sort of briefly like about the Greer effort and maybe how it relates to what Shayla's talking about? Because I know you're trying to build capacity there, just high level. Can you share a bit?
Sure. And sorry if I've been on and off screen. Our largest fundraiser is Monday. And so we have some things going on around the office, and it's our golf tournament. And so this is our 34th year of our golf tournament. So we're well known in the community for golf, but we're also well known in the community for our advocacy and for what we do to not just tobacco, but we also educate to prevent alcohol and drug use, especially among our youth, knowing that tobacco is the first one that they use to self-medicate. So in Greenville, the city of Greenville has a smoke-free ordinance that they adopted, Beth, what was it, 15 years ago? And so the city of Spartanburg has a smoke-free ordinance as well. So stuck right dab in the middle is Greer, because part of Greer, South Carolina, part of it's in Greenville County, part of it's in Spartanburg County. And so they do not have an ordinance. So what we've been able to do with the help of Beth and Barbara and Smoke Free South Carolina and our friends, our awesome friends at DHEC, is to get a group of business people together that are willing to champion the cause of the Greer City Council adopting a smoke-free ordinance. And so there are 6 elected officials to the city council in Greer. We have votes from 3 of them. And so we're at the point now of waiting to see if we have 1, 2, or 3 additional votes. And then we'll go into the framework of getting the conversation started and educating them on policy and the wording of what a good and great ordinance is. And so we started that the end of 2021. And so hopefully within the next couple of months, we should be much further down the road than what we are right now.
Phil, just kind of to Rebecca's point and Shayla's, you've done a good job, which is bringing in the right people. Can you share with the group just what your thoughts were on who to invite to that first and second meeting? Because you brought in the right people from the start, and then we've been adding to that group, but you have the right people at the table.
And I appreciate that, Beth. Y'all see it from a different vantage point than what I see it as. And so for me, it's all about community. And so part of what we have in Greer that we've been able to develop and move along so fast is through my board of directors. We are a community-based organization. We have very limited funding from outside of our fundraisers. We get some money from DHEC, we get some money from Smoke Free South Carolina, and we get some money from Children's Trust. Everything else, we get it the old-fashioned way. We earn it through our fundraisers. And so my first thought when we talked about Greer was, oh, guess what? I have a former board member who is in the banking business in Greer. And oh, guess what? He's a past president for the Greer Chamber of Commerce. Oh, guess what? He knows. And so I reached out to him. Oh, guess what? I have a current board member that is the vice president of another bank in Greer. Oh, guess who he knows? Everybody, because he grew up in Greer. He played football at Furman, which Furman University is here in Greenville County. And so he's homegrown, as we say in the South. And so, looking at our hospital system, well, one of them, Prisma. Oh, well, we've been partners with them since the early 90s when they gave us money to be the lead in our Tobacco Free Kids Coalition that we had in here in Greenville County. And so looking at those particular relationships, it all comes down to relationships of those people and saying, hey, all of you are in Greer. Let's have a conversation about some opportunities for Greer, especially one, Greer has just spent several $1 million renovating and redoing their downtown to be more attractive for businesses. And so they want to host events and festivals and those kind of things downtown. And they're also, Greer is home to BMW manufacturing. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for us to do some education to get this done. But we've also, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it because of my virtual background, but we've developed a phrase or a term, and it's air preserve. And so it's coming at it from how can we preserve the air in our community? Well, one of the ways we can do that is to limit where people can use tobacco products and vaping, e-cigs, and all those nasty things that people continue to stick in their mouth. Oh, did I say that? But anyway, we have a good time in what we do, and I'm always open. We're always open to having additional resources and partners at the table. And so we didn't get to have our meeting this month, but in April we will. And I would love for you, once we decide on that, of having you and Anjul, you're always welcome to, and anybody else that wants to come to our meeting. one of our bank people brought the Chamber of Commerce with them to our last meeting. And so, an additional business person. So, you know, it's growing and we're just happy.
I fully accept the invitation and I look forward to it. My partner was here. He would be more than happy as soon as he said golf. He'd load up the clubs and he's like, we're going. So look forward to a future trip.
Well,
and,
I may have an opening for him on Monday. You just never know.
Okay.
Registration is it opens at 8.
Don't threaten us with a good time.
Tee off is at 10. It's at Thornblade. Just saying.
Okay. And there's one thing I will share, the last bit. So last week, the center, we officially launched our health justice guide, our health justice training guide. So we had the conversation with our author, Dr. Robert Robinson, affectionately known as Dr. Bob, at the center, and a lot of folks have worked in tobacco control for a while. And the guide is available. It is a wealth of resource and information. It really delves a bit deeper into the community development model. And I think it also has a lot of great information and facts about the other side of the tobacco industry that we don't often hear about, but it's also important to understand in the history and the context. So South Carolina, of course, backyard to where some of the largest tobacco industries in the country, in the world. And it talks about how some of the aspects of employment and African-Americans being able to move through the middle class was through employment with the tobacco industry. So when you're approaching these communities, especially our elders, and talking about the harms of tobacco and the damage it has done, we also have to keep in context their personal history and connection they may have to these brands and these tobacco industries. So it's available there at the link for download. No charge to that. It is a lengthy read, but it is a very interesting one, and it's a page turner, all 140 pages. So this has been in the making for a while. I just wanted to make sure folks had knowledge of this resource is available.
Is there a direct link for that, like on y'all's website, and you could throw that link into the chat box?
Yep, I will throw it up there.
That'd be great. Philip, thanks for sharing. I learned some from what you share. I hear bits and pieces of it, and that was helpful for me to hear the way you just described that this morning also.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? It can be related, it can be tangentially related, it can be something different, just while we're all here.
So I wanted to bring up what came out earlier this week about the FDA approving additional delivery devices or for, let's see, where was that?
You're talking about Logic?
Yes. Yep. And just to where are, I don't know, it just seems every day we get more and more thrown on the other side of what we're doing of trying to prevent. And then there's more and more, oh, we're going to make it so easy for you to shift from cigarettes to e-cigs, but we know at the end of the day, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I even read somewhere, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, where a young lady was smoking the 4 pods in her e-cig every day. So then she went to cigarettes so she wouldn't get so much nicotine. And I'm just like, wait a minute, that's the wrong, no. But just, I don't know, I guess just to bring it up and to keep it top of mind, there's just, you get these big corporations that have tons of money that they do whatever they want to when they want to. And how do we hold their feet to the fire here in little old South Kakalaki?
Well, and I'm happy, Philip, to kind of give an overview. There's a lot happening, I think, with the FDA right now. Obviously, the authorization of the logic products obviously is kind of a culmination of their PMTA process. Obviously, they followed the process and submitted their application, and they approved, really only the tobacco flavored. And so I think a lot of us, we had a couple months ago where FDA did a lot of marketing denial orders for a variety of products. Logic, and then obviously Juul are some of the other big, products that are kind of lingering. We're waiting to see what they're going to do related to their marketing order for, tobacco or menthol. Certainly, they did not approve yet the review of Logic's menthol products, but the tobacco products. So we're just still kind of waiting imminently. But I think, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that with the omnibus bill that was passed and signed into a law on March 15th by the Biden administration, there was a provision in that bill that will give, or does give, FDA the authority to regulate synthetic nicotine as a tobacco product. And so this is what they're calling it the puff bar loophole. And this is where, when we had the flavor, a variety of different things, PMTA process and the flavor language that was signed into law by the Trump administration to try to kind of close some of the loopholes with, puff bar, brief smoke, and a variety of other products that are kind of subverting the regulation process. And so essentially with that, FDA will not have to actually issue any type of rules to require these products to go through the same process, the pre-market application process. And so that it basically goes into effect within 120 days. There's a lot of pieces with it. It goes into effect, I think, 30 days after signing. So I think April 14th or 15th. And then, products that have been previously on the market can stay on the market so long as they submit their application to the process. And then obviously FDA has to quickly turn around a review of the marketing orders for those products to determine whether they can be on the market. So, we're all watching to see what the industry is going to do with that. Since they didn't have to issue rules, they're saying that there may be a chance that it's not as a high threat for facing lawsuits, but it certainly is an attempt to get all of those products off the market that many youth are using now, because especially puff bars becoming the most popular on the market now. They're claiming to be tobacco free or nicotine, made of synthetic nicotine. So it certainly is a concern, Philip, especially, and I think especially from the regulatory perspective at the federal level, how do you make sense of that at the local level? I think is something that all of us that I know that I'm having conversations with, and I'm with the American Lung Association, it's just like, how do we people to understand what products are included in that and what products, because there's a lot of misconceptions still around flavored products. And I know, Shayla, this too, like thinking that, when the Trump administration passed, the flavor law, like you can't sell flavors anymore. It's like, actually you can. There's a whole large loophole with what was passed. And so, I think there's just continued education that we have to do about what can be on the market, what cannot be on the market, and the PMTA process. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Thank you, Ashley. That was really, it kind of spurred some questions and some thoughts I had. With the new products coming out, I'm curious for folks who have been here a bit longer, the local retail landscape, because we saw this similarly in my home state, and it imploded between the local retail industry, your mom and pop shops, fighting against and threatening to sue the larger tobacco retail industry, because they say, well, wait a minute, what you're basically saying is their position that we were told in a lot of testimony was, I'm a local mom and pop vape shop. I'm trying to get people to quit. That is my goal. It was the weirdest. People had little hand card cutouts, and I've saved these many people. The sign-our trips were always entertaining, nothing else. And so when this same conversation came up, they're like, well, wait a minute, this is just the tobacco industry trying to come in, and now they're taking money out of my pocket because I'm just the local guy trying to help the everyday person, and they're trying to make a whole market. And if this is approved, it pushes me out of business because now people aren't coming to me locally. They're going to see almost kind of like harm reduction, I should say harm, step down, like this type of e-cigarette has X amount of milligrams or, fluid ounces of nicotine and so forth. Like you're stepping down. They tried to model it after the Nicorette patches about varying levels. Has there been some sense of the local retail industry, if they would also push back if that were something like that were to happen?
Yeah, so I'm not sure, to be honest, to be open, but what I have seen from past legislation when we worked on preemption back in 2019, we had the VTA, Vaping Technology Associates of South Carolina, who came out to speak, and the retailers, and they have a very, very strong presence at the State House. So I would imagine that they would absolutely, it would be a little internal fight between VTA, the local mom and pops, and RJ Reynolds and Altria, the big tobacco lobbyists. Yeah, I can see them fighting against each other for that, for sure.
Yeah, and Beth, just to confirm, they are fighting, at least. I haven't seen it necessarily in South Carolina yet, but I know in other southeastern states, you have Juul, who's been sponsoring some legislation to essentially, this is all introduced prior to the FDA's synthetic nicotine piece, and this is getting into the weeds, but, really trying to basically say that, basically trying to take out the synthetic, those local mom and pop shops that may have transitioned to synthetic nicotine or that have products on the market, basically saying, in order to be sold, you have to have submitted with the PMTA and including in state statute some synthetic nicotine language. And so, Juul's lobbyist has been at the table, and it's been the local mom and pop shops and the state associations that are saying, don't listen to Juul, it has become this fight, and it's been primarily with this, statewide e-cigarette registry directory language that we've seen introduced across the state that's in the bad flavor bill as well in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is because they, Juul, I think they feel very confident about their products, right? I think they feel very confident that they're going to get a marketing authorization order from the FDA. And, they're not wanting to transition their market share because it's more expensive to, produce synthetic nicotine. And so, they're trying to go toe to toe and take out the small guys. So.
Stuff, to say the least, y'all. Thanks for all of that. Just before I got a couple wrap up things. I just want to see if anybody's trying to keep us on time here. Does anybody have any lingering comment, question real quick? Okay, so Shayla, thank you so very much. Like I tell you, every time we talk, I always learn listening to you. I really appreciate it. I feel like I'm in grad school again when I listen to you. It's like, all great theory. It's helpful to me. I appreciate everybody who continues to come to these every fourth Friday. We will keep having them. Next month, Cinti Wangu from DHEC and Smoke Free Low Country is going to be giving an update on their point of sale assessments that they've been doing in Charleston in the Low Country. And we'll be sending out information about that. Megan can go ahead and she's going to throw a registration in the chat box if you want to go ahead and do that now and just get that knocked out. Also, if you'll notice in the chat box, Shayla has put the link to get the health justice guide. And then we're also going to throw the link to the summit website in here one more time, just because you're going to hear me talking about that. But that's also coming via email. It'll be coming through the listserv as well. And that's where we are. Oh, Philip Clark, if you have like 2 minutes, can you stay on? I have something I wanted to run by you real quick, just while we're here on the screen together. That would be great. Anybody else? Unmute yourselves. Anything you want to say in closing? just, thank y'all for coming, and thank you for everybody's work. And I really appreciate all the national partners that hop on here. Anjul, Ashley, Beth, it's always great to have y'all. Anything else? Okay. Well, y'all have a good weekend. Get that pollen washed off your car.